And we're live here. This is Kyle Hunter. I'm joined by Ron Ace Sports. You can follow him at Ron Ace Sports on Twitter. You can follow me at Kyle Hunter Picks on Twitter. We've reached the championship game here in college football. Ron, thanks for coming on again. It's always nice to chat with you. How's everything going for you today?
Oh, it's going great. It's been a crazy college bowl season. The NFL heated up big time just yesterday. Um, Really in the element, in the zone right now as far as football, because a month from now, we're not going to have it. So
Yeah.
cherish it right now.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. Is college football is probably my favorite. I don't know. I always say college football or college basketball is my favorite. I'm a big college hoops guy too, as well. If you ask me in bowl season, I'd say college football is my favorite. If you ask me in March Madness, I'd say college basketball is my favorite.
Yeah.
But I always say that I'm so excited when we get into the bowl season and you get to the final game, but then you also know it's the last game,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of bittersweet. So we might as well enjoy this game. We do have a great game here, very much up in the air as far as who will win the national championship this year. Georgia versus Alabama. We've seen them play once before here a few weeks ago. We'll see how much different this game looks. Ron, first, just a quick look at the game. I'm not going to give any strong suggestion on the game. I don't have a big play on the game of anything here. I think this line is really sharp. At Georgia -3, most places 2.5 with extra juice if you want to lay -120. Bama on the money line about plus 120, 125. Georgia -145 or so. I think this is a fair line. The total is 52.5. I would make the total lower in general, but the matchups between these two teams have been high scoring. They have to be more aggressive because the defenses are so good at stopping the run. So, if anything on the game, I have a lean to the first half over in this game, but that's going to be a pizza money bet. We'll be rooting for that. The kids will be wanting that to win so they can get a free pizza or two here. But nothing big for me on the game. I guess just your thoughts on the line in general. Georgia being a slight favorite. Is that about what you thought we would have here?
Yeah, I set it right at three, so it's three. I set the total at about 53 and a half. It's right in there. These games, just like you said, um, and you get some fluke late touchdowns or a scoop and score or something like that to go over the total. These numbers are tight. The betting, the people who set the lines, they know these teams inside and out. So the big question becomes, which Georgia team are we going to see? The one that dominated 12 or 13 other opponents, or the one that found Nick Saban with, you know, just too tough once again for one of his disciples? Alabama's a different team than they were even mid-season, because this was supposed to be a bridge year between the next national championship with Bryce Young getting his feet wet. Instead, he puts up tremendous stats. And so for Georgia, this is the best team that we've seen in a long time. They want this rematch. I'll put mushrooms on my pizza and maybe put a little bit on Georgia. But I think if, contrary to what I've heard others say, I think if it's close, that Nick Saban factor comes into play. But if we see a true, really strong Georgia team like we've seen most of the year, then I could see Georgia winning by margin. It's not one of these games that I want to make any kind of decent sized play on. It's going to be a fascinating chess match as usual.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think if you just line up these two teams and you don't account for the coach, if you say Team A versus Team B, you would think Georgia would be favored by a little bit more than this.
Mm-hmm.
But Saban has won so many times, and he deserves the respect that he gets. Obviously, Kirby Smart is a good coach. He's a great recruiter. He hasn't been able to beat Saban, and he's been so close, so many times. I know some people say, well, Georgia wants this really bad. I think Bama wants it really bad too when you get in the title game. So
Sure.
I don't like to talk about motivational factors too much in a championship game because everybody wants to be there. I do think it is kind of interesting, Ron. Alabama's a lot more banged up than is Georgia coming into this
Mm-hmm.
game. There's a lot more question marks. The offensive line for Bama has had a lot of injuries. Georgia is relatively healthy for a team that's in this spot. So Georgia is the deeper team, in my opinion, the team that can win in more different ways. But Bryce Young's so good. I still have questions about Stetson Bennett. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But Ron, you're the one who's been really good at betting on props, and I know Ron does a lot of prop betting both in the NFL and in college football. So, if you could just give us a brief overview of how you try to look at prop betting when it comes to college football title game. Obviously, these props are going to be much more widely available, also
Mhm.
sharper lines than what you would get in some random game in the middle of the season. But how do you like to look at how do you bet on these as far as props?
Okay, well, the first thing I do is I set the matchups and I make my own numbers. I've got the numbers right by my side right now, so if we talk about specific players, I can quickly look and see, what I set versus what the line set is. I do think that in general, people who make lines for props, they're going to be pretty tight in the NFL, but you get more variance at this time of year. You might be able to pick off some middles where you have a 10-point yardage difference or something like that. So I'm going to look at my line versus various other lines that are out there. I'm going to look at the different matchups. I'm going to look at recency to see which players may have gone, maybe under the woodwork because they're coming on late. I'm going to look at if a player comes back, how that affects existing players. I've got one in mind for Georgia that we could talk about, George Pickens, who basically he's actually played in 2 bowl games before this year with 19 receptions, but he's only played in 3 games this year and he hasn't been anywhere near healthy. So I look about how the dynamic of having a player like that in the game who has a lot of potential, NFL potential, how that affects the rest of the team. And then as far as recency, both these teams had a tremendous ability to sack opponents, over 40 sacks for each of them. But if you look at the game they played against each other, Alabama had that 4-0 sack advantage. So, one of the questions would be for me, if you like Georgia, is how are you going to protect your quarterback a little bit better? And how are you going to get to Bryce Young? Because Bryce Young throws 2 or more TDs in every game he plays. But those are kind of the ways that I'm looking at it: the matchups, the approaches, the recency, where the lines are set.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. If you look at how this game would play out, I think you see a game where both teams would like to be able to run the football more than they're likely going to be able
Mhm.
to. Georgia is really a team that wants to be extremely run heavy, but Alabama ranks as the best rushing defense in the country by quite a few
Mhm.
different metrics. So when you have a guy like Anderson there on the defensive line, that makes a huge difference, obviously. I don't think Georgia is just going to be able to line up and run the ball. I'm pretty confident Bama's not going to be able to just run the ball like they did against Cincinnati.
Mhm.
That was certainly impressive, but Cincinnati's not used to going against those big SEC offensive lines. So you look in a game like this. You alluded to it here to start with. So, Pickens, are you looking when you talk about him for receiving yards, or looking at number of receptions, or what interests you there as far as him?
He's such an X factor in this game, and I agree with you. Georgia's going to have to pass. Bennett's going to have to play well for Georgia to win the game. Is he capable of that? Sure. Does he need all weapons on deck? Absolutely. A lot of his passes could be to running backs. I look at percentage of passes he throws to running backs versus wide receivers, and we can expect 4, 5, 6 passes to running backs. I think it's Cook in particular that will get some of those. But Pickens, he only had, I think he's had 2 catches in the last 2 games, 3 catches maybe in the last 2 games. The question is, have they been saving him for this game? Because he is a really big weapon that can go off their freshman tight end, who's their known guy. They really don't have another guy other than McConkey underneath, who's kind of a pizza type play for me as well. Uh, if you think that Bennett's going to have to complete 20 passes, then how many are going to go position by position? And I think it could be yards or receptions because Alabama's defense, 63.7 during the regular season allowed, which is completely unheard of by Alabama standards. Is this a different team? Yes, because Saban's now had 40 days since the end of the season to work with this team. And we know that Saban coaches up his team. But that number is still high, and I still expect Bennett to complete 60% of his passes. So Pickens is definitely somebody I have my eye on.
Okay, yeah, and I'm looking here. BetUS has Pickens over receptions over 2.5, minus 115. That seems like a pretty good line.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give a plug here to BetUS with being on the BetUS College Football Show with Parker and Gary. That's always a fun show. So if you haven't checked that one out, you can get more of my thoughts there as well. BetUS, a top-notch sports book as well. I think one of my favorite plays, Ron, is Stetson Bennett over half an interception. BetUS has this at minus 125. I'm not sure how many other books have this and what the price is, but I do think that's a pretty good line there. If we think about how this game plays out, in my opinion, Ron, a lot of times what Stetson Bennett's able to do is he's able to manage a game because they're ahead by 3 touchdowns because the defense has been that good. So he doesn't have to force throws and try to make something happen as much. It's just play action passes. Things are pretty wide open. The games against Alabama, it doesn't play out the same way. And I don't think this game's going to play out that way either. It would surprise me quite a bit if Bennett doesn't have to throw the ball more than what he's used to. So all you need is one bad decision from him. And even when he played so good against Michigan, in that semifinal game. You'll probably remember this play as well. At one point in the second half, he ran to the right side and threw all the way across his body. The ball landed. He was very fortunate that nobody picked it off, but that's the type of decision that you can't make. He does at least one of these in all these big games. It's really made him pay against Alabama. He's 5 interceptions in those 2 games. I don't think he'll necessarily throw 3 interceptions again or 2 interceptions. But I'm willing to bet that he's going to throw 1 interception. If he doesn't, okay, I still think it was a worthwhile bet. So I'm going to take Stetson Bennett over half an interception. Do you have any opinion on that one there, Ron?
Yeah, I think you got some value there. I did set it at minus 150. So from there, you have a certain return on investment. If they played 100 games, what would happen and so on. I agree he's going to make more throws because it's unlikely that Georgia is going to move the sticks repeatedly in terms of going against Alabama's run defense. And the other factor, random or otherwise, is that somehow Alabama always gets some sort of big play, whether it be a fumble recovery or an interception or something that leads directly to a score. And in a high-scoring game, that doesn't mean Georgia can't win the game, but it is going to mean that, like you said, Bennett's going to have to take more risk. So I have an opinion. I do think you have some value on that play.
Okay, so a couple others, Ron, and I'll throw out a couple others that I like and would like to get your opinion on those. And if you like anything else, certainly put it out there. Brock Bowers, obviously the key guy for Georgia. As I've watched this team this year, I'm just really, really impressed by everything that Bowers does. I mean, the fact that he's a freshman and is this good, I imagine the pro scouts watch that, just would love to have him there in future years. Bowers over 4.5 receptions at BetUS. I know some other books have this at 5.5, so definitely some line value there at 4.5. I'm kind of curious how you look at this, Ron. I'm pretty confident that Bowers is going to get a lot of targets in this game.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, which is the better way to play this? If you want to play Bowers over, do you take over 4.5 or do you take over 68.5, 69.5 as far as yards? Or maybe you don't like this, but I think for me, I like Bowers over 4.5 the best here. So do you have any opinion on Bowers here in this one?
I think 4.5 is incredible value because I don't have BetUS as an option. Just the listeners, the more options you have, the better. 4.5 is a great number. I set it at 6, but I also set it at 70.5 because I think you're going to see more shorter throws to him. So the option I would definitely pick is 4.5. I think 5.5 is too close to my number. I wouldn't touch that.
Right.
5 with limited juice, I could consider it because I like whole numbers. You still need 4 to lose that bet if you bet it at 5. If you bet at 5.5, you lose at 5, obviously, and that's too much of a risk. But 4.5 is a live number. I think they get them involved. I don't think they necessarily are going to be able to stretch the field with them. Alabama, even though they're allowing a high percentage, they still highly athletic. Most of those guys are going to get drafted by the NFL. That's just the nature of Alabama. It's just a question of how ready they are this year. So he gets his catches, but he may not get the yards.
Yeah, I would lean toward that being the better look in this one as well too. So, um, Mike in the YouTube chat here had a question about thoughts on Young over passing prop. I think he probably means over the yards for Bryce Young in this one. I'm seeing this line. Um, Ron, I will say this is a time for me to throw in really quick that you definitely should shop around because there are so
Mm-hmm.
many. Ron knows this better than I do, I'm sure. But as you look through some of these props, it's amazing. You can see 10 or 15 yards of difference on some of these, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to tell you guys that that's going to matter in a lot of cases. So I've seen this as low as Bryce Young over 305 passing yards. I've seen this as high as 311. So it looks like FanDuel's 304 and a half. So do you have any opinion on this one, Ron, as far as
Mm-hmm.
whether you would take Bryce Young over that number of yards or not?
I said at 325 and a half, so I would probably lean over, but it's too close to my numbers. If you get a 10-yard difference on running backs, that's really significant. If you have a 10-yard difference on quarterbacks, I've tried to go the middling route to see, what's the right number. I need about a 20-yard difference on quarterbacks because there's too much variance on quarterback yardage. My difference from 325 and a half is a little bit more random than 310, 315 and a half. My lean would be over, but it's not a play on my board.
Okay. And I would say what I like there is I take Bryce Young over on yards thrown as well as rushing yards. BetUS has this one available for 323 and a half. I think Young could
Yeah.
easily run for a decent amount of yards in a game like this. I would assume Georgia will send a lot of pressure. It could even lead to some spots where Young scrambles for 20, 30 yards.
Mm-hmm.
He's certainly capable of doing that. I've been supremely impressed with Bryce Young's ability to elude the pass rush and get rid of the ball, make good passes that way. He makes very good decisions. I think that Bryce Young has really impressed me a lot here at the end of the season, obviously with that Auburn finale and then
Mm-hmm.
and the SEC title game. And obviously he didn't have to do too much against Cincinnati, but I think it'll look a lot different again in this game. So, Ron, are there any other props that you'd like to
Mm-hmm.
throw out there as either leans or plays that you like?
I'm going to throw out one interesting one, not necessarily widely available, but we have talked about a few others like Pickens. And even though my numbers don't support it, I have the sneaking feeling that McConkey could catch more than two and a half passes in the underneath route. But there's a player on Georgia that I actually like under. And during the regular season, I'm the kind of guy who's going to play 75% of my plays under. But in a championship game, it's harder to do that. Georgia has a rotation at running back. They go White, Cook, and they used to go with Joe Milton, but Milton was hurt for 4 or 5 games, and McIntosh came in, gave them 5, 6, 7 carries. Milton came back last game when they played Michigan. Milton, I think he ran 5 or 7 times in there, and McIntosh was reduced to just 2 carries. Now he's back to fourth in the rotation. They still have a number up on him. 22 and a half to 24 and a half is what I've seen at the places that are available. If he gets even 5 rushes against the Alabama defense, I don't think he hits the 22 and a half or 24 and a half number. So my recommendation in a rotation for Georgia, a team that I think will have to pass to win this game, unless for some reason they get way ahead and something happens. You're always susceptible to one long run, but McIntosh would be my recommendation under for his rushing total only.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I think that one is available probably on about half of the books, so
Yeah.
definitely check around. You know, I kind of think some of the other Georgia rushing total unders might be good bets as well. I don't think that Georgia will have a ton of success on the ground here. You know, Zamir White under looks like it's the highest I've seen is about 52. It goes as low as
Mm-hmm.
45. Uh, The problem, like you said here, and that's one thing that everybody that's betting props needs to keep in mind is that you're always susceptible to one thing, one
Yeah.
bad thing happening. And Ron, I'm just going to give you one from what I bet last year. You remember Ohio State and Alabama was the final game. I had bet Trey Sermon over for rushing and receiving yards. And if you remember, he got hurt on the first play of the game.
Yeah,
So
that's
that was not exactly the greatest outcome for me,
yeah.
certainly. And obviously, that type of thing happens. That's why, I would suggest everybody to, bet something that you can afford to lose, use good bankroll management here because it's always possible that somebody breaks a 75-yard run. It's also possible that somebody gets injured on the first play of the game. So be wise with these. Ron, I don't know. Do you have any kind of, and I didn't tell you this ahead of time, so I apologize for putting you on the spot, but do you have any kind of like bankroll percentages that you like to stay within when you bet on these prop bets?
Um, well, sometimes you get limited on props anyway because you can't bet as
Right.
much and so on. And at certain establishments, I'm automatically eliminated. So I have bankroll management already,
Yeah.
but not by choice necessarily. I usually don't go close to flat betting like I would on straight plays because there's just a couple that are rogue numbers that you can beat. You may not beat it in that one game, to your point, Kyle, about, any one thing can happen. But over the course of time, when you see rogue numbers that don't correlate to what you think is going to happen, you're going to win those. So my bankroll management kind of goes up and down. It's more pizza money sometimes on these championship games. But one piece of advice I would give is if you like a side on this game, make sure you correlate your prop bets with the side. You don't want to be betting overs on Alabama if you really like Georgia, at least in some certain, you're not going to bet Robinson to go over 100 yards or something like that rushing if you think Georgia's going to control the game and Alabama's going to be forced to pass, and vice versa. If Georgia's going to have to abandon the run game, or if they're going to use 4 different running backs or 3 different running backs, you don't want to go crazy on that one. If it really depends on what side you like, or if you like a total high or low. So keep in mind what you're betting, what your feel is for the game, and then look at your props accordingly.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I've seen some other people do things like that where, they like one side, but they're betting props on the other, and it's just kind of confusing. It's not really the great way to hedge either. I mean, I don't think that's the way you want to hedge a bet, especially if you feel strongly about something. So, I guess my point was just to, some people like to do this. Here's 20% of my bankroll on something.
Um,
It's just, when you do that in a single game or on a prop bet, you're just asking
yeah.
for disastrous results. And those are the people that get on Twitter or send an email to somebody and say, what do I do? I got to make back all my money all at once, and
Mm-hmm.
just put you in a really bad spot. Ron, that we've all had issues in the past at
Yeah.
some point. If you bet on sports, that you
Yeah.
realize I can't do this anymore. So, Ron has done a great job. Ron taught a class at Sports Wagering U for college football. I thought he did a great job there breaking down betting college football. We're going to be doing more with Sports Wagering University here going forward. I'm excited about that. I think Ron's going to be doing a chat here about the NFL playoffs too, so we'll give a quick plug for that as well. There's going to be some great matchups coming up.
Yeah.
I do want to throw out here really quick, Ron, are there any like really big plus money? We see like anytime touchdown scorers, first touchdown score. Again, this would be something that I wouldn't put very much money at all on. It's just something that's kind of fun. In these games, I don't mind putting small bets on something, at least just to have for watchability. It makes it a little bit more fun as well. So when you see the first touchdown score, anytime score, or anything, any of the fun big plus money ones, do you like anything like that?
I looked at that briefly. I usually would just do anytime touchdown.
Yeah,
I have no idea what the first touchdown. I think there's built-in vig that kills you in those kinds of things.
I agree.
I think that my first look would always be quarterbacks or running backs. Are they guaranteed to get or the odds are, what's the return on investment? I always look at it from a percentage. If I think they are 7 out of 10 times they're going to score a touchdown based on data and matchups, and their number is even money, then I have some value because if I think 7 out of 10 versus 5 out of 10. I also look at whether a quarterback could push a touchdown in for a run and what their number is. The other one in bowl games that tends to work, usually you need to get about 2-1, is special team or defensive touchdown. Because teams haven't played for 20 or 30 days in bowl games, you're looking at units being hastily put together. You have some good return people. You have some rusty quarterbacks. You have opt-outs and new quarterbacks playing that haven't taken a snap in college. We saw that a lot in the bowl games. New wide receivers because their star wide receivers out. If you get plus 200 on a special team or defensive TD, that means you have to win 1 out of 3 times to break even. Historically, that hits probably about 3 out of 7, 42% or so. So you have a little value, 42% to 33%. I think it's a good pizza money game. In this game, I would consider it because of Alabama's ability to do something like that. But I'm not seeing plus 200, so they're aware of it too. So my short answer would be, I'm not sure I'm going to find anything in those little small plays.
Okay, I'm going to take one here. Bryce Young, anytime touchdown,
Okay.
plus 420 at FanDuel. I
Ooh.
think plus 420 is a pretty good price for a guy that can scramble very well. I don't know. Do you have an opinion on that one? Plus 420 price
Plus
there?
420, you basically, if you think he's going to score a touchdown 1 out of every 4 games, you have some value right there. It seems kind of like a reasonable number. So
Yeah.
I would have to look into that. I would, if anything, lean on your side, maybe strongly.
Yeah, that's one that I like, and I am going to bet that one personally. So, some of those that stand out to me, I like Stetson Bennett over half an interception. I like Bryce Young passing rushing yards over 323 and a half. I like Bowers over 4.5 receptions, and then my small bet there, I'll take Bryce Young anytime touchdown plus 420. Ron, I know you said you like Pickens over either receptions or yards.
Yeah.
And what would you say is your behind Pickens? You said maybe McConkey would be your second
He's
favorite.
second, but above both of those would be McIntosh
Okay.
to
Yeah.
go under. And then Pickens and McConkey that way. And the other thing, like Super Bowls and so on with variance and lines, I look for middles or sides. Sometimes you can get almost free money where you go over 2.5, under 3, over 2, under 2.5. I'm doing some of these things more or less balancing one book against another and shading it the way I kind of like. If I can find a McConkey at 2, that would be a good live number for me, for example. So I'm really looking more at middling or kind of a win tie situation to have some good stuff going in this game. A lot of the lines look a little tight to me. I wish I could recommend 7, 8, 10 plays, but it's probably going to be a 3 to 5 play game for me.
That makes sense. So one final question here, Ron. Based on the difference from one book to another, let's take like Bowers. Because over 4.5 receptions, other books have it 5.5. So, at what price point do you decide that maybe trying for a middle on something like that is worth it or isn't worth it? Because if you get a minus 115 on each side, over minus 115 over 4.5, under 5.5 minus 115. How do you feel about trying to middle something like that?
Lots of thoughts on that one. First of all, if I lean toward a side like Bowers over 4.5, I'm going to go 75-25 with the over 4.5. The other thing is I like to have whole numbers involved. You're asking for an exact 5 to get both ways. And while we're dealing with finite numbers and catches, you're not going to have 23 catches or something like that. That's a hard hit at minus 115 each way. Even a 4.5 and a 5, with the 5 being maybe an even money where you have just a 15-cent difference instead of 115, 115, or 30, is more attractive to me because I could get a win and a tie out of it. Yeah. If I have to middle something with an exact whole number, 4.5 versus 5.5, the ideal thing is to have a 3-4 or 4-5 or a 5-6. Then I'm in at minus 115 either way. I'm definitely in because you got 2 whole numbers. So I'm looking for whole numbers mostly to answer your question.
I like that, and I think I'm pretty confident if you get over 4.5, you can find some places that under 5 would be plus money here. So
Yeah,
it's something like that, where if you take over minus 115 and you get under 5 plus 105 plus 110, that would definitely
that's good.
be a good way to go.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. If you have a stance on it, you can always bet 75 or 80% of it on the one and
Mhm.
just come back 20 or 25% on the other. So it's
Yeah.
fascinating to be able to pick your brain here about these props. I don't bet props too often. I'm usually more on the single games. And Ron, it was great to have you on here again. Thanks for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me. Maybe next year I'll have a site where I can have more of my writing on there. But right now, it's just a pleasure to be on with you and also hear your thoughts, because networking is one of the top things you could do in order to improve your handicapping skill.
Absolutely, I agree with that, and I would encourage everybody to follow Ron at Ron A Sports on Twitter. He has some great thoughts. A big football guy, college football and the NFL. So I'm sure he'll have plenty of thoughts on the NFL playoffs going forward too. So his thoughts won't be done here after tonight's college football game, and I'll have plenty of thoughts coming up on college basketball as we come in the future weeks. So. Check everything out. You can subscribe to my Twitter, or you can subscribe to my YouTube, set up notifications there. We'll be going live some here in the future again. I hope I'll be able to chat with Ron at some point here in the NFL playoffs as well. You can check out everything that's going on at sportswageringu.com. We'll have live classes coming up there again. Ron's done a great job with everything he's done there at Sports Wagering U. We're certainly excited about everything that's coming in the future months there as well. So I hope everybody has a great championship game. Enjoy the game. Good luck with all your bets. We'll see you next time.